Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thank you to our special guests this evening for the audio support. We appreciate it. Herb and Neil. We are convening this evening for council meeting number 27 on Tuesday, May 16th at 6:30 for the open portion of the meeting. As you may be aware, we met in closed at 5:30 p.m., at which time council approved the agenda. So before we proceed with the rest of the meeting, I would like to invite a council colleague to read the land acknowledgement, please. Council colleagues? Thank you, Councillor Barclay. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to get to it. Here we go. The municipality of North Grenville acknowledges that the municipality operates on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe. We honor the historic relationship of the Haudenosaunee and Huron-Wendat peoples to this land. We recognize all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who now call North Grenville their home. We respect and support the need for cultivating a strong relationship with all Indigenous peoples, and we look forward to continuing this conversation and fostering the path towards reconciliation.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So we'll move on to disclosures of interest, council colleagues. Any disclosures in regards to real or perceived financial benefit or loss derived from any item on the agenda this evening? Not seeing any declarations, we'll move on. Under presentations, delegations, it's my pleasure to welcome Sarah Jane Manning on behalf of NG Pride. So Sarah, come on down. And we have this new audio system, which I must say is very crisp. Feels very audible. We feel audible. And that will mean you too are audible, Sarah. So if you flip on your mic, we're not used to this level of audio. It's a new experience. Very, very impressive. All right. Welcome, Sarah.
Welcome. Greetings. Haven't done this before, so how would you like me to proceed with the recommendation?
If there's any background you'd like to give, feel free.
Oh yes, we have our presentation. So
okay, that sounds good, and then we'll go to the recommendation.
All right. North Grenville Pride celebrations for 2023 are coming up. And just a little on the significance of the 2S LGBTQIA+ Pride Month for people. It provides a visibility and recognition of legitimacy for community members who are 2S LGBTQIA+ persons. It's not just about equality, it's about acceptance as community members and recognition. Our mission for NG Pride, the goal is to build a community that creates a sense of belonging and connection for all our 2S LGBTQIA+ members so that they can live without fear or judgment within the greater community. And our vision, an equitable community free from all forms of oppression. I am not going to read this slide, but it is a little bit of our history, primarily because a lot of you know a fair amount of our history. We were created after the original 2018 Pride Parade. The first board that I had the pleasure of helping to form was in 2019, and we've been kind of evolving and changing ever since. Our upcoming plans, we have lots of events that are rolling out. We're doing things in conjunction with and partnership with the North Grenville Rainbow Youth Alliance as well. You all know Mel, who fractioned off of our group to look after youth and provide programming in that area. And it's been great to be able to start doing things together and hopefully bringing more supports for people in that community and in that way. What we have been up to. We formed the Rural Pride Collective this year, which includes, we've got Lanark, Smith Falls, Brockville, Delta Pride, Gananoque Pride. I feel like I've forgotten somebody there, but we're hoping to ever grow that, just so all these small rural groups can help with resources for one another, and just a greater network of supports that's a little more self-sustainable and sufficient. Partnering with community resources. Moving forward, we're trying to do more partnerships in the community. We've been doing a program at the library, which has been a great start, and we're looking for more opportunities in that area. Programs and events, I already touched on that. We've been trying to do some more things just to offer people in community a way to get out, not be isolated, and to build friendships and community. I know I keep using that word, but it's a big word. And of course our parade in 2023, which really occupies a lot of our time because we are just a handful of volunteers, and it's a big thing to try to roll out. So we're looking forward to that. Our current state. Currently, the primary focus of NG Pride is to support and provide education, promotion, and networking opportunities in support of the 2S LGBTQIA+ persons and allies. NG Pride will provide the spirit of pride in our community's identity throughout the year, and it'll culminate in the parade. So we aren't just a party once a year. We're trying to do good work and continue to keep that out throughout the year. Really, what I'm here for today, which is talking about raising the flag for the month. June is Pride Month, a lot of places, and for 2S LGBTQ+ IA+ persons, especially members of the community such as trans persons, their identity is something that makes them subject to violence. I mean, we've all seen things in the news as of late. It has been a really wretched year for that population. Daily affronts against their dignity and denial of basic human rights for 2S LGBTQIA+ people. The fight for equitable human rights in Canada and worldwide continues to be a struggle to this day. So you're probably all aware of Stonewall, which happened in 1969 in New York City, where residents fought back against police brutality. And the 70s kind of started off the United States and Canada's civil rights movement for gay communities. And since 1978, the rainbow flag has been a triumphant symbol of justice and dignity. A flag represents a group of individuals and collective power to make change. Because of a lack of social inclusion and experiences of discrimination violence, the 2S LGBTQIA+ individuals face more risks than their peers. A recent report explains that LGBTQS+ youth face approximately 14 times the risk of suicide and substance abuse than heterosexual peers. And adults have higher rates of depression, anxiety, self-harm, and suicidality. The key ways to deal with these challenges include creating a supportive community, inclusive workplaces and schools, and space for community building, exactly what Pride celebrations are all about. Lastly, how to celebrate. Saturday, June 3rd, is our parade. Kicks off at 1 p.m. and we're starting at Riverside Park. But the events director would very much like me to mention registration forms are on the NG Pride website. So come walk with us and join us at the Kemptville campus for the after party until 5 p.m. Throughout the month of June, NG Pride will also be networking and celebrating with other Pride groups in the region. The newly formed Rural Pride Collective, Brockville Pride, and Gananoque, for example. So keep an eye on our social media to hear more about it. Okay, that is it for presentation. Now, do I read this recommendation?
It's whatever you'd like.
Okay.
Sarah, you can read it?
Okay. Sure, I can go ahead. Recommendation for council. Whereas the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms recognizes sexual identity and sexual orientation as human rights issues. Whereas the 2S LGBTQ2IA+ community is growing in the municipality of North Grenville. Whereas on May 19th, 2020, Council established the month of June in perpetuity as 2S LGBTQIA+ Pride Month in the municipality of North Grenville. Be it resolved that Council arrange to fly the Progress Pride flag in consultation with the 2S LGBTQIA+ community among the flags at the municipal center, and that the municipality of North Grenville actively support Pride Month virtual activities and festivals during the month of June. Thank you.
Thank you. So council, as we've done, I think, every year since we got elected, I'll look for a mover and a seconder for the recommendation as presented by Sarah. Thank you, Councillors Barclay and O'Sullivan. Any comments or questions in regards to the month? I think we're all very excited about Pride, the Pride Day, the march, the celebration, and I understand it's on the campus this year and not on Riverside Park. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
We're starting at Riverside Park and we're ending with the after party at the college. Just a little more room.
Yeah, makes sense. So starting at Riverside Park and ending at Kemptville campus. And is registration mandatory for the march itself? Is that?
It's kind of a hard element to control.
Indeed.
We're encouraging people to
Register.
beforehand and register and sign waivers and just
Understood.
pictures and everything else. It's just easier.
So Sarah's suggesting that by registering, you give consent for photos, they have a better sense of numbers, and they can sort of make sure that people are safe and the roads are cleared, and you're able to ensure that all goes well. So thank you. Okay, I don't think I've called the vote yet. So all in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you, and thank you so much for the work of all members of NG Pride. It's great to see that you carry on and you get bigger every year, which is awesome. So hopefully this Pride March and the month itself will make its mark as it does every year. So thanks a lot. All right, take care. Stay in touch. So with that, Jill Sturdy from our comms team wanted me to be sure to mention that May 17th is the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia, so we're right on the cusp of that. And that day was created in 2004 to draw attention to the violence and discrimination experienced by lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, intersex, and all those with diverse sexual orientations, gender identities or expressions, as well as sex characteristics. So council, just please note that that day is tomorrow. A couple of other things before I move on that I neglected to mention at the beginning. This week is National Peace Week, and as I think everyone is aware, very tragically, a officer that had a long tenure with Grenville Detachment was killed in the line of duty on May 11th, last Thursday. He, of course, in addition to serving with Grenville OPP, had transferred and was on duty the evening that he was killed with the municipality of Clarence Rockland. He was a sergeant, and I know there were many, many people in this community that knew Sergeant Mueller, and we just want to formally express our condolences. A really tragic and unforeseen loss, and we are so very sorry. On a better note, Buskerfest is on Saturday, and we know there's lots of excitement around that festival. Of course, much of Prescott Road will be closed that day, but there's lots of accommodations and a golf cart that will be available to ensure that people can get around and move around and access their residence if their home, if they're not able to drive into where they reside on Prescott Street. And of course, at the same time on Saturday, there's the Bishop's Mills Community Day and Yard Sale. Always an exciting event. I'm very fond of it. Unfortunately, I can't be there this year. I'm not in town on Saturday, May 20th, owing to a family commitment with my son in Montreal that we hadn't expected to emerge, but there it is. Nonetheless, you have lots of good options on this Saturday. So with that, we'll move on. Colleagues, you'll see under the consent agenda that there are a myriad of items. Of course, council colleagues have the capacity to pull any item that they would like to be addressed separately. The list is there. I will not read it. I'll just look for a mover and a seconder for the consent agenda as presented this evening. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Wilson, thank you. Any comments or questions? Not seeing any, I will call the vote. All in favor, please. Good. That passes. I want to thank all of the committees and the municipal staff who are supporting, I think, up to 10 committees right now, with 2 or 3 others to come online shortly. So many, many thanks for all of the community members who've stepped up to serve on those committees and the staff engagement. It's not insignificant. So we appreciate all of the good dialogue and goal setting that's happening in those meetings. So I'll move to reports briefly, just turning it over to our acting CAO. Ms. Dunlop, anything for you this evening, Ms. Dunlop?
I have nothing this evening from the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer. Thank you.
Okay, over to Client Services. Welcome, Ms. Boyce. Anything this evening?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Tonight I just want to provide Council with a very brief update on the corporate communications and rebranding strategy. We are hoping to have the RFP go live in June, looking for the strategy to be in place by the end of the year. The strategy will support our communication practices internally and externally and create corporate communication policies and procedures that will drive effective, transparent communication practices. We are also expecting that this will help us grow our social media platforms. And with respect to the rebranding, this will help establish our identity with respect to communications, but also for North Grenville marketing and tourism. Our goal is to be engaging with key stakeholders, the community, businesses, and staff to provide input into the strategy, but also for promoting our overall identity. And we will also be looking at emerging and best practices of municipalities, and we'll build off our strategic plan, customer service review, and various economic development studies. And as I move forward, I'll be sure to be coming back to council to provide more formal updates. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Very exciting. Any questions for Ms. Boyce, colleagues? Seeing none, I'll move on. We will go to Ms. Jeannot, Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a very quick report tonight. It's a pretty standard annual item we have. Next slide, please. So this is the annual report of the Integrity Commissioner that we provide every year on the previous year's activities of the Integrity Commissioner. Next slide, please. In 2022, there was one request that was received for advice related to conflict of interest, which is the most common question our Integrity Commissioner receives. And additionally, there was one complaint or application for inquiry through the Integrity Commissioner's office. And that concludes my report. Next slide, please. And we just have a recommendation for you to receive for information purposes.
So we'll look for a mover and a seconder for receipt of the report, please. Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Strachan, thank you very much. Questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please. Good. Thank you. Ms. Jeannot, I know this is being worked on through the Mayor's office as well, but perhaps just quickly, our June meeting, or one of our June meetings, will be part of the start of a rotation around our hamlets, correct?
Correct.
As part of our 25th anniversary event.
Yes, so starting on June 20th, we will be doing a little bit of a road show. Council will be having their meetings throughout the summer, with the exception of planning meetings at the different hamlets. So the first one on June 20th will be at Oxford Mills.
Excellent. And I think we're very excited to get out of town. Or I should say to get out of Kemptville to get into other small towns and hamlets. So I look forward to that very much. And council colleagues, if you're worried, all of the calendar invites are in your schedule. So these are regularly scheduled meetings that we are going to rotate around the various hamlets. Okay, thank you. Emergency and Protective Services, Chief, anything for you?
Good evening, Madam Mayor. Just a couple little points. First of all, the municipality of North Grenville received a letter of compliance from the Treasury Board Secretariat. That was in relation to our Emergency Management Civil Protection Act requirements for 2022. North Grenville met all 13 legislative program elements for that year. So we're very happy to pass along that we're in compliance for 2022. The second item that I wanted to mention to Council is just a little update regarding our emergency responses from the fire department so far this year. It's turning out to be quite a busy year for our department with 180 emergency calls received so far this year. That's equivalent to 9.3 calls per week in compared to last year's average of 6.5 emergency calls per week. And that's all I have for updates. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. And you might be interested to know that there was a lively discussion about fire services at a county strategic planning meeting earlier this week, which is, I guess, yesterday. So I have a feeling you may hear more about that in the coming weeks. But thank you very much for the work of yourself, the deputy, and of course all the volunteers. Moving on, I've just skipped over our agenda. I think we are not hearing from finance this evening. Of course, Mr. Ogunrende is off on a brief parental leave as he has welcomed a new addition to their family. And I believe Mr. Ogunrende is back in June? He's back next week. Back next week. Okay, fantastic. No Parks and Rec and Culture update. So we are going to go to Planning and Development. And we welcome Ms. Martin for a brief presentation. I know she gave a version of this to CDAC, if I'm not mistaken. So some of us have seen it before, but look forward to a quick overview. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. And we, planning staff also attended the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee as well, because there's some policy changes that will affect that area. So if we just go to the next slide. Just a bit of background is the province introduced what is known as Bill 97 on April 6th of this year, which included what is now being called the Provincial Planning Statement. It's currently posted on the Environmental Registry of Ontario for comment until June 5th, so we do have some time to get some comments in. And the proposed planning statement merges the provincial policy statement, which is currently in effect, and the growth plan for the Greater Toronto Area. So in essence, there'll be one planning document that provides the policy framework across the province. So in regards to the policy areas, there are a lot of areas that are touched. There are some new areas, new concepts, and I'm just going to quickly go through what those are this evening. So the first item is in regard to housing. So there's, what I'll just state is that the planning statement is a huge divergence from the policy statement policies. And there's not a lot of carryover. Some concepts are brought forward. But what we're seeing is, where we were supposed to plan for up to a 25-year horizon or a 20-year horizon on housing, we're now being required to plan for a minimum of 25 years, maintain a 15-year residential land supply, and a servicing capacity for a 3-year supply for residential units. And again, this fits in with the province's plan of having 1.5 million new residential units built across the province of Ontario over a 10-year period. The housing policies require a range and mix of housing typologies, and it moves away from including policy language related to affordable housing and housing for low and moderate income households. So from a planning perspective, this is concerning as we have questions, and in our comments to the province that was included in the report as an attachment, we just, our stance is that will this weaken our position as a municipality to work with developers to provide affordable housing when the policy framework for the province of Ontario no longer includes this language. So how will that impact our ability to ensure that we're working towards creating those opportunities for affordability? I will say that there is new policy language in there in regards to social inclusion, but again, the policy does not provide enough strength for us to continue our push for affordable housing. Next slide, please. We'll just advance one more. So density and residential intensification. So where the policy statement previously or currently, which is still in effect, requires that municipalities plan for residential infill and intensification and establish minimum density targets, this plan moves away from that and instead shifts the language to encouraging and recommending that municipalities do establish targets for density, although it is not a requirement. It also shifts the language to encourage different housing options, so typology. So when moving away from density, they're encouraging that municipalities still ensure that you're building different housing typologies, so you're not just building single detached dwellings, but you're putting some consideration into what we would consider the missing middle housing, which is your townhouse units and your low-rise apartments. There is a requirement, however, to establish densities for new and expanding settlement boundary areas, as well as for some of the strategic growth area policies. Next slide. So strategic growth areas are being brought in from the growth plan for the Greater Toronto Area. The definition is before you on the slide and is within the report. So these are more policies that focus on intensification. It's an area where you'd have mixed use. And again, it's encouraging for having your employment uses mixed in with your residential units uses. This is only a requirement to be defined within municipal official plans for large and fast-growing municipalities, which is also a new term being introduced into the planning statement. We are not considered a large and fast-growing municipality. There are 29, and as you can imagine, they're mostly GTA-centric municipalities. What is encouraging is that the policies are in there, although we don't have to adopt them. We can choose to adopt them if we wish. So planning staff thought this might be a great opportunity for certain corridors, like the 43 corridor, to adopt some of these policies to encourage that mixed-use development. Next slide. Settlement area expansions, the policies are shifting in regards to this matter. So where previously you used to have to do a comprehensive study to determine your settlement boundary expansion, or if in lieu of that study, you could only have zero net growth, which means if you're taking from one area to add to another, it had to equal it to zero growth in regards to the number of acres. That's gone to the wayside. So the planning statement proposes some criteria that needs to be met, but developers or property owners could apply to have the boundary expanded to include their lands. Servicing will be the item that will be required for us to have most consideration around when considering it. Through Bill 97, it does limit the ability of a developer to appeal a decision of a municipality in regards to settlement boundaries. So at least there's some protections there. If we say no, we're not going to be brought into a long and protracted Ontario Land Tribunal hearing over it. Next slide, please. So I brought the proposed employment area changes to our Economic Development Committee as there are some changes that could have an impact on our employment lands. So one of the things that the new planning statement will do is it starts to define more what an employment use is, and this includes manufacturing, research and development in connection with manufacturing, warehousing and goods movement, and associated retail and office uses and ancillary facilities. So if a use is outside of that more well-defined definition, it would be considered as either being as a non-compatible use or a non-conforming use. So from our perspective, when we look at our traditional employment lands, a lot of what's built there currently is large format retail, which wouldn't necessarily fit the definition. So we're going to have to do some work, should the province adopt these policies, as to how do we address these non-conforming uses, or how are we going to look at or redefine the boundaries of our employment area. One of the positive changes coming in is that it does encourage smaller scale manufacturing and warehousing to be located outside of employment areas where adverse impacts can be mitigated. So in that regard, again, trying to encourage mixed use communities and having, not trying to put all of your uses in one area where they can be made to be more compatible with other land uses. And then the other big change here is that they're taking the requirement just similar to the settlement boundaries. We are no longer required to do a comprehensive review to remove lands from employment areas. The planning statement does establish those criteria that needs to be considered. One of the concerning pieces on this is that it just makes it easier to take lands out of an employment area, which is set aside for those heavier type of uses. Next slide, please. One of the components I'm actually really excited for that they did include is this concept of complete communities. So looking at that mixed use neighborhood, trying to encourage neighborhoods where you can access all the amenities that you need without necessarily having to get into a car and drive to them. So again, it's trying to create more of that, denser communities where you have the ability to access your retail, your employment, schools, and other public services, and where it could allow for the creation of more different forms of transportation systems, including active transportation. One of the concerning pieces here, though, is that the policies being put forth in other areas of the planning statement seem to run a little contradictory to the complete communities idea, in that expanding of settlement boundaries without a comprehensive review or a more deep dive into is this a logical extension of our community. It may lend itself to more sprawl type development, and not mandating minimum densities makes it harder to achieve that idea of a complete community, because it does require some densification. Next slide, please. Agricultural land policies, the province will be opening up severances within the agricultural land. It will allow for up to 2 additional residences on an active farm operation where there's a principal dwelling, and those units could be subject to severance. And there will be up to 3 residential severances permitted on a property where there is an active agricultural operation. So minimum distance separation will also still need to be adhered to, so we're not entering into the space of our livestock facilities or those agricultural uses that require greater separation. When I did take this policy to the Agricultural Committee, there was comments in regards to there needs to be some scalability in regards to the severances. If you have for instance, a 10-acre parcel that's being actively cropped, to put 3 residential severances on there would essentially nullify the use of that land. So the comments that were provided through the committee have been added into the comments that were provided in the attachment with this report. Next slide, please. So rural development policies are also changing. Settlement areas in the rural area are no longer to be the focus of growth in the rural area itself. Policy language has been removed that required limited development and required compatibility with the rural landscape. So from our perspective, we see it as opening up opportunities for some commercial and industrial uses to be located within the rural area. And then we've identified that we need further provincial guidance as to what the intent is behind the multi-lot development. It's uncertain at this time as to whether or not the province is intending to open up rural estate subdivisions again in the rural area. Next slide, please. So on the implementation side, in certain sections of the of the planning statement, particularly the agricultural policies and the employment land policies. The province has put in language that states that we cannot provide or implement more stricter policies than what the planning statement allows. So they're really trying to ensure that municipalities don't further devolve their policies into something that would work counterintuitive to it. Like any planning statement or any policy document, it takes time to catch up. Can't just pivot and have all of our official plans and policy documents match the planning statement the day after it's implemented. So there is policy language within the statement itself that even if we're not up to date, we still have to provide consideration to the planning statement. And the province has also identified that they will develop key performance indicators to measure the success of implementing the policy statement. This is something new. It's not something that we had previously in the current policy statement. So they're trying to use this document as that barometer as to how we're achieving our, our goal of creating 1.5 million houses. Next slide, please. So just some concluding thoughts. And again, the policy changes are intended to support the province's goal of 1.5 million new houses in the next 10 years. They bring in new concepts to create complete communities and identify areas for strategic growth. I personally think that there's some opportunity here at our level to take advantage of these policy concepts and further continue to try and create those more sustainable communities where you've got that mixed use and we're not creating pockets of residential here, commercial over here, and employment in another corner. I am concerned from a planning perspective over our concerns in regards to being able to push for more affordable housing, especially in our new developments. And I do feel that there is a weakening of policies that previously supported density and intensification, which may lend itself more to sprawl type development. And to that end, so the recommendation before council this evening is that you receive the report, but also that should you be satisfied with the comments as presented in attachment 2 of the report, we can provide those through to the environmental registry to the province as to our comments on the proposed planning statement.
Thank you very much. Council colleagues, I know some of you have had the benefit of this information and maybe others have not. Any questions for Ms. Martin at this stage? I'm not seeing any. Oh, I'm sorry, Council Strachan and Council Berkeley. Okay. Council Wilson or O'Sullivan, I don't see hands. Okay, then I will start there and I'll put myself on my list. I just have a quick question. So, starting with Councillor Strachan, please.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor, to Director Martin. On the topic of expansion of settlement boundaries, so you mentioned that the developer or property owner could make a request to have the settlement boundary changed. 2 parts to that question. One, what do they require for substantiation on their part? Do they need to provide anything beyond simply requesting it? And on our part, if we were to deny that request, is there a rationale that we're required to provide? Are there certain key factors that we need to be able to respond to in order to deny that request in light of just sort of the way this is currently phrased? Thank you.
Through your worship, to Councillor Strachan. So the planning statement does set out some criteria that we would have to, the individual requesting that their lands be included would have to demonstrate. Part of that would be sufficient capacity. So we do have a master servicing plan. I believe that part of that master servicing plan would identify lands that might not necessarily be within our urban service boundary currently, but looks to what does that future look like. There are other requirements that they would have to identify, such as it's not comprised as a specialty crop area, that it complies with minimum distance separation, and then again, there's things about impacts on agricultural land, and that the new or expanded settlement area provides for the phased progression of urban development. So there are things that, in criteria that they will have to address when they put the request forward, and they will have to demonstrate how they meet the criteria as established within the policy statement itself. In regards to should we not provide a favorable decision on including those lands as requested, further regulations required by the province to define what our requirement would be. Certainly there would be a public meeting and a process that we could provide why or why not we did not want these lands included. So, and it simply could be that it did not meet the criteria as established in the planning statement.
Thank you. If I may, just a quick follow-up. So we will be undergoing a review of our own official plan in the fall, I believe. When we're looking at that, part of the discussion will be our discussion of whether or not the settlement area, the expansion of the boundaries and so on comes up. And so regardless, I guess, based on what you've said tonight, correct me if I'm wrong, the PPS will supersede what our official plan says. So regardless of whatever changes we decide, if the PPS says that they can be changed, then does our official plan mean anything as far as the urban, the boundaries go?
Thank you for the question, through your worship. Again, given that these are still draft policies that are out for review, I would anticipate that we'd still have, as a municipality, that control to say yes or no as to whether we want them included. Do we want to expand the boundaries that we have defined through the official plan process? The other aspect of this is that the policy still requires us to coordinate with the upper tier government, right? And so that's part of the understanding that we're going to have to come to is how's the counties going to treat settlement boundary expansions as well, because we must conform to their schedules, and what's that process going to look like? Because again, there's still draft policies and nothing's in effect yet. Haven't had those discussions with how that would coordinate, but there'd have to be consideration for that as well. So it wouldn't just be, we're just going to, approve this, or people think that they can just come in and say, my lands are going to be included. There is a process. Council still does have a say within that process as to whether or not we do expand.
Councillor Barclay?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To Director Martin, I find it kind of funny that we're not considered a fast-growing area. Certainly in the context of Eastern Ontario, you must appreciate that we are growing very fast. And so I appreciate the work that you and the planning staff are doing to handle the number of proposals for development that come across your desk, and also appreciate the work that you're doing to navigate what I see as a very shifting landscape. Certainly we had Bill 23 and Bill 109 come down the pike, and I think you and Phil Mosher are tap dancing as fast as you can to accommodate those changes. One of my concerns is what I see as conflicting language in the proposed changes, and you've highlighted it, and Councillor Starker just did, in terms of there's fewer restrictions to expand the settlement areas. And how does that work with what I perceive as a goal of ours to increase density? If the areas, if it's far easier to expand the settlement areas, it looks like we're encouraging some sort of urban sprawl. So, our goals of, one of the highlights is for yourself, and I know there was only one real highlight, and that was the language that supports complete communities. How are we going to, or how is the province going to reconcile this density, fewer policies that support density versus, the goals of complete communities? I mean, I think you've got, I appreciate the comments that you've made and the concerns you've raised, but it seems to me, quite frankly, to be a bit of a mess, and I don't know how it's going to resolve. That's just a comment. Thanks.
Do you have any comment, Ms. Martin?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I think just recognizing what the Deputy Mayor said, this is the third major piece of planning legislation that changes our processes and our planning framework in which we work within a year. So it's been a lot to keep up with, and we'll do our best to continue to communicate those changes and the impacts to the municipality, to our development community, and to the community at large. And part of why I come to council is just to make everyone aware of what the changes are and what it could mean for us. So certainly I think the point in regards to complete communities is well taken, and I'll ensure that that point is well made across in the comments we provide to the province through the environmental registry.
Okay, thank you. We had again, wearing my county's hat, we had a presentation on some aspects of the changes, and certainly it's obvious that some of the drivers are bigger cities, That being said, given that North Grenville is still 2/3 rural, and there seems to be an appetite for rural residences and rural homes, I do see this as providing some flexibility that I don't think we would have had previously. Clearly a shift, from that highly urban-centric intensification to something that perhaps better leverages existing lands in North Grenville. So from my perspective, it'll be interesting to see what we can do with that. I know for most in the province's minds is the creation of the minimum 1.5 million homes. So it feels like they're doing their absolute best to find ways for municipalities, both certainly bigger, but to some extent smaller, to navigate potential growth in new and different ways. So the other thing, just very quickly, Ms. Martin, is I know that I've heard from farmers in the municipality of North Grenville who have wanted to sever, right, for an adult child who is looking to potentially take over the farm, or for another family member. And of course, they've been extremely frustrated by the fairly rigid policy at the provincial level. Did you receive any feedback at Ag and Rural Affairs that opposed that particular perspective?
Thank you, Your Worship. Maybe not an opposition of the ability to create severance opportunities, because certainly there is value in being able to create that opportunity for a member of the family who actively participates to have a property that they can build a house on. And again, that helps them build equity within their farm operation. But the comment more so from the committee was that it just needs to be scaled so that the smaller parcels of agricultural land aren't just being lost to residential development over time where there's an active agricultural operation. And again, it's going to depend on the individual to talk with, especially for anyone who's in livestock farming, where you have setbacks from your livestock barns. That's going to be a consideration for them as well to ensure that their ability to expand their operation. And we went something similar through this with the minor variance very recently, where it was very top of mind of more residences within our influence area, or the potential to be within the influence area will limit our ability to expand that type of operation. So certainly there are some benefits. It'd be nice to see the provincial guidance documents come out with the planning policy shift, but that never happens. It usually comes months later when you want those questions answered now, but you still yet to be seen how they're going to treat it, because it makes sense for the primary farm operation where you've got your primary farm residence, but that 100-acre parcel, which is just cash cropped, does it make sense to start taking houses off of there? And the issue that we start to run up against is that you're introducing maybe some new people that aren't farmers into a very active farm operation. You start to run into those conflicts of people who've just never lived next to an active operation, and that new rural conflict becomes very real for those individuals when you start to realize what actually goes into farming a property.
Yeah, great. Good observations. I'm sure there will be much discussion ahead. We're just at the beginning. Council colleagues, anything else on this? I want to thank planning staff. I know you've really done your homework and tried to present the information in multiple forums so that at least as a community we are better equipped moving forward to understand the implications of the changes and know there's lots coming from the province. So never a dull moment. So thank you very much for a comprehensive analysis. It's much appreciated. So with that, I'm going to move on. Just under this report, I'll just for a mover and a seconder for receipt. Thank you, Councillors Wilson and Strachan. And I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. And now, under Public Works, I know you're wearing two hats, Ms. Dunlop. We've already accepted the Guy Road speed reduction and want to thank Karen and her team for implementing that, owing to a speed reduction on County Road 18 that many residents wanted, and we were finally able to get through at the county level. I appreciate that the speed has also been dropped on Guy Road. So apart from that, is there anything you want to bring to our attention?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one item from Public Works, as I did circulate council in regards to the award of the concession road water main. As you may all know, that 2023 budget did have the reconstruction of the water main along Concession Road from Prescott Street to about the South Branch School. It's partially funded by a grant. We did go out to tender, and the 7 tenders did come in under the budget allotment. So it was the intent to award based on the CAO's delegated authority. The 7 contractors' bids ranged anywhere to just under 800,000 to just over 1.6 million. So there was quite a variant. So we did do a legal review, as well as had our contract administrator, which Mac Perry, they did review some references, because it's a company we've never worked before, who came in as the lower bid under our tender process. So that was the intent, to award to the lowest qualified tender, which is TJL Construction at $796,000 through the CAO delegated authority, but that has raised the question of the delegated authority. So we will be raising that back probably on the next council agenda to get clarity, as the bylaw does provide for the delegated authority through the pandemic, with some wording that was a little open-ended. So that is the intent, that we will bring this back for discussion and potential termination at the next council meeting.
Indeed, and thank you for that. And certainly, again, wearing my county's hat, while there was temporary delegation of authority, it did come to its conclusion within the last year. So it may be prudent for council to reassume some of that authority, given that we have the capacity to meet regularly and converse. Ms. Dunlop, if I can just ask, that due diligence process with the lowest bidder on this particular tender for Concession Road, I know that sometimes, I'm going to speak in general terms to not disparage anyone. I know nothing about this company, but I know sometimes when contractors don't have a good reputation in larger urban areas, they start seeking work in smaller areas. And that's because they, in fact, don't have a great reputation. So knowing nothing about this company, which I'm sure is a very fine contracting company, can you just please speak to where this particular company may have worked before, or what kind of feedback you got from references?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the contract administrator did check multiple references. They have primarily worked in the Ottawa area. I do not know the specific areas. But all the references came back fine. They were also questioned in regards to methodology and steps that would be required to complete the project. So there seems to be the understanding. We do have full-time contract administration through McIntosh Perry, so we will have engineering firm on site to make sure that we are dotting our I's, crossing our T's, and making sure the water main, as Concession Road is a designated area with a hospital, schools, campus, daycares, etc. And the intent is to start this as soon as school ends and to be complete just before school starts back up again.
And I know we received some federal or provincial grant dollars to offset what is a very sizable project. Do you recall what those are?
I'm sorry, I do not.
Okay.
But I can bring that back
Sure.
next week.
Excellent, thank you. I believe it's in the hundreds of thousands, if I'm not mistaken. So a fairly significant offset for what is a major capital works project. Okay, thank you for that indulgence. I see no other hands. Okay, so we'll move on. So other business colleagues, I don't think we have anything this evening. Notice of motions, looking to colleagues for notice of motion. Good. Introduction and consideration of bylaws. I believe we've addressed all the bylaws this evening, is that right? Okay. Questions from members of the media or community? Not seeing any. Okay, so before I close the meeting, I do want to thank, go ahead, Councillor Strachan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to remind everyone that the aquatics programming and the hiring is complete, and the registration will be open starting Tuesday morning at 8 a.m., and that includes the swim team as well, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Waiting with bated breath. And is that information now publicly circulating? Because I have yet to hear of it.
It is on social media as well as on our municipal website.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's a great shout out. I know many have been waiting. So just before we go, thank you again to our new audio team for getting us through this hump. The audio is again, quite something. Never really experienced this fine audio. We usually have to shout and we wonder if we can be heard, but not in this moment. So thank you very much. And I just want to recognize Megan. Megan, thank you. I know you're serving as deputy clerk now and will increasingly support Hillary in some of her work. So I appreciate you being here this evening. Thank you. Okay. So for a close of meeting, that bylaw 5923 to confirm proceedings with council at its regular meeting held on May 16th be adopted and passed. Mover and seconder, please. Thank you, Councillors Barclay and O'Sullivan. I will call the question. All in favor? Good, thank you. And then motion to adjourn at 7:28. I will look over to this side. Councillor Wilson, Strachan, thank you. And I'll call that question non-debatable. All in favor? Good. Thank you very much.